Tim Gleason, who is now the city manager in Decatur, Illinois. And we'll get to Tim in just a minute. But as you are coming in and getting situated, take a moment and use the chat box, if you will, and say hello to us and tell us where you are watching from today or where you serve. And when we get everybody in just a second, we will go ahead and get started with our conversation. Hello, Michelle from Woodstock, Virginia. And glad to have some folks from the East Coast with us. I'm way over on the West Coast today, out in Milpitas, California, doing a set of workshops for them. So my setting's different. My biological clock feels different, and everything's a little bit off for me, but glad to have you here. Well, Krista, we're going to get started with this conversation, and so excited to have Tim Gleason. And let me just give a brief introduction of Tim. And this is someone that has been a friend of SGR from way back. Currently the city manager of Decatur, Illinois, which is a city that he had worked in previously. But we got to know him at SGR when he was the city manager of Bloomington, Illinois, where he had also previously been the chief of police. And Tim was one of the first managers to reach out to us about servant leadership workshop and creating a servant leadership culture. And we had the privilege of doing a number of things with Tim through the years before he left there about a year ago. But most importantly, we had the privilege of watching this organization really catch on with the principles of servant leadership. So Tim, welcome. We're so glad that you're here and making time to join us and talk about these concepts. And I want to just start by asking you, fill us in a little bit on your career. Tell us about your background a little bit.
Okay. Well, first off, hello, everyone. And appreciate the opportunity just to, have this conversation. I guess my background, I was a police officer for 25 years. And one of the questions that I think I'm going to be asked is, who's a mentor? Well, it was a mayor that I worked for and saw something in me and said, would you consider city management? You see the bigger picture. And I went and finished up my master's degree years ago, and now 12 years as serving as a city manager. Truly has been a blessing. And when I speak, I like to tease and say, I was driving around in a squad car one day, and what could I do where I'm disliked even more than being a cop? Well, I'll be a city manager. And I was right. So, no, but somebody saw something in me and took their advice, and truly have been very blessed.
That's awesome. Thanks for giving us a laugh there, but it's really pretty true. You can imagine if there's anybody that's more unpopular than the police chief, at times it's the city manager.
That's true.
Chris, I'll throw it over to you and let you kind of get started with some questions.
Perfect. So I'm curious, Tim, because I think we all have those people who inspired us along the way, or that we looked up to as role models. I often say that Mike was that person for me, but I'm just saying that on this because I know it embarrasses him. So, Tim, what about you? Do you have any coaches or mentors that you could tell us a story about that really impacted you in your servant leadership journey?
I do, and I'd be remiss if I didn't start at the very beginning. Truly was blessed with the parents that I have. I mean, my father's no longer with us, but my mom and dad, not just my dad. The sons typically talk about their fathers, but I've got an amazing mother who's still with us, and it started with them, and I know that professionally. I have a relationship with the mayor that I just did mention, where I served as a police officer. I didn't know him well, And but he corners me one day in the hallway and says, Tim, have you ever considered being a city manager? And I said, no, I'd like to be police chief someday. And he goes, you ought to consider it, because you do see the big picture. I was very active. I was involved in the union, the insurance and benefits committee. I was served on the police pension board, and he encouraged me to pursue the master's degree, and I did. Since then, there have been other mayors. The one that I served in Bloomington, truly, I would say, is that mentor and coach. He's an amazing person himself. His name is Maboka Melawambwe, and he is not Irish. He's from the Congo, and his story of coming to the U.S. about 30 years ago, and he never left, and now he serves as mayor in Bloomington. And then also another one is a gentleman named Jim Ardis. He was the mayor for a long time in the city of Peoria, Illinois. And these are just people that I was able to turn to, and were great coaches and mentors, sort of that big brother type of relationship. And Carissa, real quick, you mentioned Mike, so now I've known Mike for a handful of years, and I put Ron in this category, but I truly have a closer relationship with Mike, when you need some uplifting, or just a quote that's going to resonate, he just always finds the right thing to say. So I agree 100% with you, Carissa.
I can totally relate to that, Tim. And I've never met someone who can quote like so many people and so many books so readily. I mean, Randy Mayu might be up there with you, Mike. Y'all might be tied, but it's pretty impressive. Like that's a lot of memory bank you have there.
Yep.
Well, you're both very kind, but let's get on to the conversation.
Okay. Well, that's part of the conversation.
I know this is relevant, Mike.
Well, Tim, take us into Bloomington, and I know that mayor, by the way. He is an awesome leader. Yes, he is. And but take us in there and talk to us about what sort of piqued your interest in servant leadership and us doing this endeavor to help you improve, transform, strengthen the culture, however you want to word it. Kind of what was motivating you there?
And again, I'm gonna go back to my law enforcement days. I very much understood, what my role was. And you think about law enforcement, but I always wanted to have, always tried to turn any given situation into a positive experience. I don't want to make it sound like it was a game, but it really was something that I tried very hard, and it became a conversation. Even on a traffic stop. Why couldn't I had the ability, but why couldn't I turn that in some sort of positive exchange, and it's entirely with how I conducted myself. And that's something that started then. And then I had other positions, the very first community that I led, we suffered a F4 tornado, an outbreak that was 11 years ago, and found relationships and sort of that approach that I had, or belief that I had. And I'm going to go back to, honestly, again, where this started is my faith. And there's no better leadership or management book than the Bible in my mind. And Phil, that has been a guiding light for me. But when I was in that community in Washington, it lent itself very well. When I was here in Decatur the first time, 2015 to 2018, and I really noticed this as I was leaving the organization the first time. So many people were coming up and they were saying, we're going to miss you, all those things that you expect. But the thing that I really heard the most, it wasn't all the big things that we accomplished. It was the relational type of things that I was hearing that these employees would miss. And what they didn't realize is how much I was going to miss that, because, selfishly, it's something that motivated me every single day. So now 2018, I go to Bloomington and I start catching, some of the servant leadership stuff through SGR. And my ears perked up and I thought, hey, I might be doing this already, but there's obviously a way to do this better. So that's when I first reached out to SGR. We had employee forums, we had retreats for council and staff. And, I heard, and I was sharing this, in the past with Mike, but COVID happens. And then what I heard during COVID from several people is how much this cultural shift in Bloomington, towards servant leadership, caring for your coworker, availing yourself to them in times of need, because we all have those. I knew in law enforcement, you didn't know what was going on underneath your neighbor's roof. Just take that moment and pause and be there for one another, because we spend so much time together. Well, I heard from employees through COVID that that cultural and philosophical change in the organization truly carried the day for them and carried them through COVID. And then coming out of COVID, we had employee forums, they were in person, and, just heard a lot of positive things about that. And I think everybody was ready to meet in person, and we had set that groundwork beforehand, and really it took off. Bloomington is amazing.
That's awesome, Tim. What about, so when you kind of, as you said, like when y'all kind of started down that path, did you have any situations where you had maybe some people that were a little resistant to it, where you had to keep pushing or kind of keep that train moving, even though maybe there were some people who weren't as eager to embrace that culture?
But, as the boss, I didn't hear it, to my face anyway, when I'm having those director meetings. But I think, I was aware of it, Krissa, and how I was aware of it was, the lack of participation. You can tell someone to be at a certain place or to do a certain thing, and they'll do it just because the boss is telling them to do it. But you get to a point in all of it, we'll call the evolution of this, that you realize that, hey, people are really getting this. People are really becoming far more engaged and involved, and you can see it catching fire. And that's exactly what happened in Bloomington. And, that's exactly now a very quick 6 months back in Decatur. That's what I'm trying to do here as well. Because at the end of the day, look at the jobs that we do in local government. The intense scrutiny that we're constantly under, we're checking boxes, moving on to the next crisis. We rarely take that moment to celebrate our victories, and we have to be intentional about this. And servant leadership is right at the top of that allows us to celebrate those wins and make sure that we're a cohesive team and accomplishing the mission of the city. Because at the end of the day, we've got communities that are dependent on us in local government, and I love being a part of that.
Yeah, I love how you say that, Tim, because I can remember earlier on when I was working with SGR, early years, and just beginning to see how cities function. And it seemed to me that there was already a tendency towards these principles of servant leadership, but sometimes there was a little bit of a hesitancy to embrace them. And, it seems like with cities in particular, but I would say this applies to other organizations. If you go ahead and lean into it and embrace, the concepts of my success comes from making others successful, it's not necessarily that you get more done than you would, but it's a whole lot easier because you're not fighting against the grain all the time. And so I see that as really important. Now, obviously, we did some things in person and online directly with you, but you also took advantage and continue to take advantage of our annual Servant Leadership Conference, which is coming up, by the way, January 30th and 31st in the great city of Grapevine, Texas. But you have used it mostly virtually. Talk to us a little bit about that, and how's that made a difference?
Oh, tremendous difference. In the past, I'm going to do that here. And in fact, this will be the first time that I'm attending in person. but always open this up to the organization, would send a team in person to, have that experience, but then also did the virtual participation as well. So, Bloomington and Decatur, they're larger organizations where you have, 500 to 700 full-time employees. So you avail this opportunity virtually in different locations, and you have teams that are basically setting and watching the conference live, as it's going on, and then even after the fact, that option as well. But it allows for the teams to get together. They're able to participate in the conference, but then also there's opportunities for them to discuss the different things that they're hearing. And then even beyond the conference itself, have those opportunities, whether it's a lunch and learn, whether it's something that's part of the director staff meeting at my level, or whether at the department level, the director has tasks or questions related to servant leadership. It's that perfect platform that sets in motion everything after the fact, but it's critical.
Yeah, I love that. And before Krista goes on to the next question, I just want to say, I think what you're doing is an ideal way to use the Servant Leadership Conference. You can't maybe afford in your budget every year to send your whole team, especially if you're outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But the idea of sending a few people personally, including, you as the leader, but other leaders, but then a larger part of your organization watching it virtually, to me, that seems like really a great way to maximize your conference budget, or however you've got it budgeted, so that it can really impact the city. So that I hope there'll be some other organizations that'll take note of that. And Krista, let's move on, but that's a great thing to hear, isn't it?
It absolutely. I was thinking the exact same thing, Mike, because I know that they have attended virtually, and Tim had shared that they really maximize their virtual attendance by having some of those smaller conversations with their team during the conference. And I think that is, it's music to our ears for sure, because that's what we're hoping that organizations are doing. We want that practical application taking place, from hearing from the presenters and learning, but putting it into practice with your team. So excellent. Tim, I have a question for you. So this might be a hard one, but was there a moment where, you had that like aha moment, as Ron would say, and you thought, okay, this is happening. Like this is like a turning point or a pivotal moment where you could see it, in action in your organization?
I think the biggest one for me was, there were smaller individual ones where, I'd mentioned, we're in COVID, and we're sort of coming out of COVID. And I had people at all levels of the organization. I'm not going to exaggerate and say that it was a tremendous number, but it was enough number that it got my attention, over different times, where people were talking about feeling a culture shift. Some might have been able to truly put their finger on it and say, this is servant leadership. Maybe a lower level wasn't quite aware of that's what was going on. But they talked about a change in the culture and how important it was to them coming through this crisis, coming through this pandemic. But that moment where it was a much bigger, it was at a much higher level, was our first employee forum that we held, and it was voluntary. I had 3 different sessions. Had Ron come in and was a part of that. But that's where I'm standing. I had a small role in this, where I'm standing on the stage, and I had some opening comments, and then I'd come out with Ron and have take some closing Q&A. But it was at that moment, looking out at the employees and the kind of interaction. It was not silent. There were questions that were being asked. And that was that aha moment, like we had really accomplished something here. And hopefully, this is just the beginning of the bigger and better. And I know it is.
Awesome.
I love what you're saying. And I want to dive a little bit deeper to that, Tim, because I've been to Bloomington since you left, as you know, and worked with the council retreat there, and the new manager, who's doing a great job. And, you always say you can tell about somebody's leadership in an organization really after they're gone. And so they're carrying that on. And I remember in one of these council retreats that I was facilitating, kind of a mid-level employee that I had not met started talking to the council about the impact of servant leadership. But I want to point this out, and I want you to elaborate on this. What he was talking about was not, if I could say it this way, niceness and healthy relationships. What he was talking about was innovation and growth and development. And I loved it because this is what we always say, that the great power of servant leadership is that dynamic tension between, on the one hand, nurturing healthy relationships, and on the other hand, driving for innovation and excellence in execution. And you were able to accomplish that at Bloomington. And in fact, one of the council members from Bloomington is going to be doing a workshop for our Alliance for Innovation team at the Transforming Local Government Conference in April in Scottsdale. So we have both of those. Talk a little bit, I know you don't like to brag, but talk a little bit about some of the achievements that the city of Bloomington accomplished over the last few years that you guys are working on, and they're still working on, because they're pretty impressive.
They are. And, I'll tell you, I don't need to brag because there's nothing to brag about, for me. It's me just, having this, awareness that I've got some amazing staff, and I mean that. And I was in a key position, the position to make certain things happen. So really what you do is you just get out of the way and you allow them to do the great things that they're doing. But what I will say is when you talk about process improvement, efficiency improvement, and trying to tackle those things, if you do not have the base or the culture within the organization, a servant leadership culture, it becomes harder to try to implement those process improvement changes because, there's a trust, there's a faith, in what the true motivation is of the employer or the boss or the leadership team for the city. So I firmly believe that one comes first before the other if you want to maximize the success of process improvement. And that's exactly the steps that we followed at Bloomington. And I don't know that there was some master design, but there was that thought that this is, what we need to do first. We need to change the culture and then truly have amazing people at the organization. I go back to me and this opportunity for me to return to Decatur. Challenging times in Decatur. They felt when they reached out that I could make a difference. That's the way. That's what motivates me. Is the belief that I can make a difference in something. But I knew that the organization Bloomington was going to go to new heights that I could not carry them to, because there was a great deputy city manager that was stepping up. There was other people on staff that were going to carry this thing to new heights. And it is awesome to be able to sit from afar and watch the social media feeds or the different things, from staff that I'm still connected with. And truly, it all started from this belief of servant leadership. It did.
If you don't mind, Mike, I was going to ask a question. I really like that you just kind of commented on some of the social media feeds, because I think a lot of times we look at servant leadership as very internal. And like with that comment, you're kind of identifying that there's an external component there too, where it's serving your community in that way and they're seeing it as well. Do you want to add anything to that, Tim, about kind of the outward benefit to servant leadership culture?
It's all part of it. We in local government do not do a good job of telling our story. And I call these outlook moments where truly you have to put them on your calendar and say, I'm going to do this. Because if I don't do this, my day is going to be consumed with stuff that truly it's important, but I may not remember it, like some of the other things that I'm being intentional about. And that is telling our story, whether it's, replacing or filling a record number of potholes, or whether it's turning a coliseum around to be a true entertainment venue. It's all these things that if I don't tell that story, then nobody's going to, or somebody's going to be left to fill in the blanks, and they aren't going to fill in the blanks accurately or the way that I think they should be. So again, it's something that the employees pay very close attention to, and I think it feeds them and puts them in a position to strive to do even better. And again, I'm coming right back to servant leadership, being intentional about that investment in the organization.
You mentioned the deputy city manager, now the city manager, Jeff Jurgens, and of course, he's a great leader, and he's had, I know, impact from other people. But just what you said about seeing the potential, the abilities in Jeff, and being able to hand that baton off, that's a big part of servant leadership too. Is I go back to Robert Greenleaf, and you say his quote of saying, the best test about a servant leader is to see how are the people that they are serving prospering. Are they getting healthier, freer, wiser, more autonomous? They want to follow in your footsteps. And it just seems to me that this is a great story because, your relationship and Jeff, those boxes are checked. And it's so great to see that success continuing. Let me ask this question. We start wrapping it up. As you're working in Decatur now, what lessons, positive, negative, did you learn in Bloomington that now you're putting into practice, maybe the same or maybe a little bit different in Decatur?
I think there's a lot of things, because now, the last 6 years I was in Bloomington, and, I've seen the success of this investment and the tremendous value. And again, SGR and the programs, that we've participated in, I've seen how to do things better, which might have been the cloth that I was cut from all along. But it truly enhances my effectiveness as the city manager in Decatur, definitely in Bloomington. So I'll tell you the one thing that it does is there's no one going to talk me out of the value of trying to address the culture and implement servant leadership. So I step into, back to a different organization than Bloomington. There's a lot of similarities, but the one thing that's a constant is trying to implement this philosophy, this value of the employee. We have 3 collective bargaining agreements in Decatur. We've already, taken care of 2 before they even end at the end of the year. And they were 3+ year battles, the last go around, prior to me returning. So it's just a number of small things that we're already, seeing the, we're reaping the benefits from, this approach. And I'm going to say that Decatur, probably doesn't even realize that that's what's going on. They may not be able to put their hands on, hey, this guy is talking about servant leadership, but that day's coming this spring. Talking to you, Mike, and that's something that's coming to this organization as well.
Well, I'm really excited to come and be a part of things. And, we always say at SGR, we know we don't transform anybody's culture. It's the people that are on the ground that are working there every day. Those are the people that really make the difference. Hopefully we have a role in it and some encouragement, but it's really kudos to the employees in Bloomington and in Decatur, and to you, Tim, for that kind of transformation. And, I don't know if Peter Drucker really said this, but he's the one that gets credited with it, that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes.
And it's so true, isn't it?
Yes.
You've got to have that healthy culture, like you pointed out. No matter how good your strategic plan is, if your culture is toxic, you're not going to get as much done as when the culture is healthy. And that's what this is all about. And
Mike, I know we're wrapping up, but real quick, and in this position that truly I'm blessed to be in this position. And, I have the self-awareness that I have very few answers, but I surround myself with key people, not like-minded either, but just the smart people that we can get the business of the city done. I also feel an obligation that this is not about the 25 or 30 working years that you have, with your professional career, but it's also, at the end of a career, when you're looking in the mirror that last day, I want someone to know that they have been valued and they have made a difference within the organization. And then in retirement, that fourth quarter of life, I want it to be about quality, obviously quantity, but I want it to be quality, and somebody can reflect back that they made a difference. And as they're driving around their community, this is what they did. And truly, it's an intentional approach and a belief in servant leadership.
Wow. Well, that is so awesome and so well put, Tim. And I just want to thank you so much again for your time and for your leadership. Look forward to seeing you in January at the Servant Leadership Conference, and look forward to being in Decatur hopefully sometime this spring. Any great questions or anything you want to wrap up with, Krissa?
I just want to say thank you so much for sharing, Tim. It's so encouraging and always a great reminder to hear, and insightful to hear the success story that you've had. And I do think I want to say Tara commented that she's watching from Bloomington and wanted to say that Tim's a wonderful example of servant leadership. We have a great city manager who followed him, but we miss you, Tim. And I thought that was really sweet of her to say in the chat.
Tara is amazing. Yes.
I love that you said, Tim, you alluded to it during the webinar, but you said it right before we started, but you said that servant leadership and building those relationships fills your cup. And I thought that was a really powerful thing to hear somebody say, especially such a good example of a servant leader. So I think that speaks volumes to your character and the way you are as a leader.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
You bet. Well, thank you everyone for being here to participate in this. A big shout out to everyone in Bloomington, Jeff and all of that staff and council. We're so proud to see all that you guys are doing. And a great shout out to Decatur, Illinois. And we're very excited for you and the growth and the changes and the great things you're going to be doing, and everybody else. So we want to invite you to register for the Servant Leadership Conference, either in person or virtually. You can find those links on our website, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Have a great day, everybody. See you down the road.
Thank you all.